There was a time when the world learned about history not from Twitter or television, but from a newspaper boy shouting, "Extra! Extra! Read all about it." Today, we're revisiting the headlines that stopped the world, front pages that announced triumph, tragedy, and moments that changed everything. These are the words that made history. War end. Victory in Europe and Japan, May 8, 1945. Across America, Britain, and Allied nations, newspapers screamed the news in the biggest letters their presses could print. Germany surrenders. Victory in Europe. War ends. People poured into the streets, celebrating, crying, embracing strangers. After 6 years of devastating war, it was finally over in Europe. 3 months later, August 15, 1945, another historic headline. Japan surrenders. Peace. The mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki had forced the unthinkable, and World War II was truly finished. These weren't just headlines, they were prayers answered. Families could hope their sons, husbands, and fathers might come home. The world could begin to rebuild. Newspapers were kept, framed, treasured. People wanted to remember exactly where they were when they read those words. Man walks on moon. July 21, 1969. Man walks on moon. Simple words that represented humanity's greatest achievement. The New York Times, normally reserved and formal, ran the headline in enormous type. Underneath, astronauts land on plane, collect rocks, plant flag. Around the world, newspapers captured the moment in every language. In Britain, man on the moon. In France, on a Marquise sur la Lune. In Australia, man lands on moon. Over 600 million people, more than a fifth of the world's population, had watched on television. But the next morning, they wanted to hold that moment in their hands, to read every detail about Neil Armstrong's first step, about the flag planted in lunar soil, about the human achievement everyone had witnessed together. These newspapers became instant collector's items. People bought multiple copies. Schools posted them on bulletin boards. It was proof. We did it. We actually did it. President Kennedy assassinated. November 23, 1963. Then there were the headlines that broke our hearts. November 23, 1963. Kennedy slain appeared in stark black letters. The world was in shock. President John F. Kennedy, young and charismatic, the symbol of hope and progress, had been shot in Dallas. The details were still emerging. A motorcade, a rifle, chaos. People grabbed newspapers with trembling hands, desperate for information, for some explanation that made sense. How could this happen? Who did this? Why? The image of Jackie Kennedy in her blood-stained pink suit was on every front page. The grief was universal. Even people who hadn't supported Kennedy politically felt the loss deeply. It was one of those moments when you remember exactly where you were when you heard the news. And the next day, when you held that newspaper, the reality sank in deeper. April 16, 1912. The headline that shocked the world. Titanic sinks 4 hours after hitting iceberg. 866 rescued by Carpathia, probably 1,250 perish. The supposedly unsinkable ship had gone down on its maiden voyage. The wealthiest people in the world, along with hundreds of immigrants seeking new lives in America, were lost in the freezing Atlantic. The newspapers told stories of heroism and tragedy. The band playing as the ship went down. Women and children saved while men went down with the ship. The insufficient lifeboats. The nearby ship that didn't respond to distress signals. People couldn't believe it. How could the pride of the White Star Line, the most advanced ship ever built, simply vanish into the ocean? The Titanic headlines sold millions of newspapers and remained the biggest story for weeks as survivors' accounts emerged and the full horror became clear. October 29, 1929, stock prices slumped $14 billion in nationwide stampede to unload. Black Tuesday, the day the stock market collapsed and the Great Depression began. Fortunes vanished overnight. Millionaires became paupers. Banks failed. People lost their life savings. Soup kitchens and bread lines would soon appear in every city. These headlines were frightening because they affected everyone. The economic devastation would last a decade, fundamentally changing how people thought about money, risk, and the future. Families kept these newspapers as reminders. Never again would they trust blindly in prosperity. Hitler dead, May 2nd, 1945, just days before VE Day. Another historic headline, Hitler dead. The tyrant who had plunged the world into war, who had orchestrated genocide on an unprecedented scale, had taken his own life in a Berlin bunker as Soviet forces closed in. For people who had lived through the war, who had lost loved ones to Nazi aggression, this headline meant justice. Incomplete and imperfect, but justice nonetheless. The evil was defeated. The nightmare was ending. November 10th, 1989. The wall comes down. For 28 years, the Berlin Wall had symbolized the Cold War division between East and West. Families had been separated. People had died trying to cross it. Then, almost overnight, it fell. East Berliners poured through checkpoints. People attacked the wall with hammers and pickaxes. Germans danced on top of the barrier that had imprisoned them. The headlines captured joy, pure, unrestrained joy. The Cold War was ending. Germany would reunite. Freedom had won. The power of the printed word, these headlines did more than inform. They captured moments when the world changed. In the age of instant news and social media, we've lost something. There's no physical object to hold, no front page to frame and hang on the wall. But for those who lived through these moments, the newspapers remain, yellowed and fragile now, but still powerful. Still proof that these things actually happened. From victory to tragedy, from triumph to terror, these headlines documented humanity's greatest moments and darkest hours. They remind us that history isn't abstract. It's real people experiencing extraordinary events, reading about them the next morning, and knowing the world would never be quite the same. Do you remember any of these headlines? What news moment will you never forget?